Harry earned $63,000 a year as a systems analyst. After rent, student loans, and groceries, he had maybe $400 left each month. He wasn't broke. He wasn't thriving. He was stuck in the middle, watching everyone else talk about breakthroughs he couldn't see. And then he noticed something that changed everything. There's a pattern that plays out before income ever multiplies. It's not about hustle. It's not about luck. It's a sequence of invisible shifts that happen in the same order, every time, for people who go from stable to exponentially better. Most people never see it because they're looking at the wrong metrics. Harry wasn't special. But he started watching the right things. He lived in a one-bedroom apartment in Phoenix. His checking account hovered around $2,000. His savings account had maybe $3,200. He wasn't in crisis, but he wasn't growing either. Every month felt the same. Income arrived, bills left, and the cycle repeated. He had no room to breathe, no margin to build. He was efficient, responsible, and completely plateaued. One night, scrolling through a used bookstore app, he bought a copy of a book on wealth psychology for $3. It arrived in a torn envelope. The pages were dog-eared. But one chapter stopped him cold. It wasn't about earning more. It was about what happens in the gap between earning and multiplying. The author called it the pre-ignition phase. Harry didn't know what that meant yet. But he circled the phrase in pen. The book said most people focus on the spark. They want the moment income doubles or triples. But the spark doesn't come first. What comes first is the setup. The conditions. The small boring moves that create the environment where multiplication becomes inevitable. Harry read that line 3 times. Then he did something tiny. He opened a spreadsheet and wrote down every dollar he spent for 1 week. Not to judge it. Just to see it. Nothing changed immediately. He still went to work. He still paid the same bills. But he started noticing patterns. Coffee wasn't the problem. It was the seamless auto-renewals he'd forgotten about. A streaming service he hadn't used in 4 months. A subscription box that felt like a gift to himself, but arrived like clockwork whether he wanted it or not. He canceled 2 things. Freed up $38 a month. It felt like nothing. It was everything. Month 2, he didn't get a raise. He didn't start a side hustle. He just moved that $38 into a separate account the day after payday. He called it the gap account. Not savings. Not investment. Just a place where dollars could sit without being spoken for. By the end of the month, it had $38 in it. By the end of month 3, it had $114. He didn't feel richer. He felt like he was watching something grow in slow motion. Then his car broke down. The repair cost $640. He didn't have it in checking. He had to pull from the Gap account and add the rest to a credit card. It hurt. He felt like he'd lost progress. But here's what he noticed. He didn't spiral. He didn't skip the next transfer. He just started again. $38 the next month. Then $42, because he sold an old monitor on Facebook Marketplace. The Gap account refilled. Slowly. Quietly. And something in him shifted. He stopped seeing setbacks as disasters. He started seeing them as part of the sequence. This is the part most people quit. They hit a surprise expense, drain their buffer, and decide the system doesn't work. But Harry kept the transfer going. He kept the habit alive even when the account balance dipped. Because the point wasn't the dollar amount. The point was protecting the pattern. By month 6, the Gap account had $411 in it. He didn't celebrate. He just noticed that his brain had changed. He used to think about money in terms of what he could afford. Now he thought about it in terms of what he could delay. Could he wait 2 weeks to buy that jacket? Could he pause that purchase until next month and let the Gap account grow instead? The delay became a game. And the game became automatic. This is where the framework starts to show up. Harry didn't name it yet. But looking back, he was moving through what I'll call the 4 filters. The first filter is awareness. You can't shift what you don't see. The second filter is separation. You can't protect what isn't separated from the noise. The third filter is endurance. You can't multiply what you don't sustain through disruption. And the fourth filter is redirection. You can't scale income until you redirect energy from consumption to construction. Harry had passed through awareness when he tracked his spending. He'd entered separation when he created the gap account. Now he was deep in endurance, learning to keep the system alive even when life punched him in the budget. But he hadn't touched redirection yet. That was coming. Month 9, something quiet happened. A coworker mentioned a freelance gig. A local nonprofit needed someone to audit their database systems. It paid $800 for about 12 hours of work. Harry's first instinct was to say no. He was tired after his day job. He didn't want to give up his weekend. But then he thought about the gap account. He thought about the pattern. He said yes. He finished the project in 2 Saturdays. The nonprofit paid him in a check. He deposited it and immediately moved $600 into the gap account. He kept $200 for himself, bought noise-canceling headphones he'd been watching for months, and felt no guilt. Because the pattern was protected. The gap account now had $1,037 in it. And for the first time, Harry started to see it as a tool, not just a safety net. Year 1, he did 3 more small freelance projects. None of them were huge. One paid $500. Another paid $650. The third paid $900 because it involved weekend travel and he charged accordingly. He didn't quit his job. He didn't burn out. He just said yes to work that fit in the margins, and he funneled most of it into the gap account. By month 14, the account had $3,200. Here's where the shift accelerates. Harry started using the gap account differently. Instead of just letting it sit, he moved $2,000 of it into a brokerage account and bought a low-cost index fund. He didn't try to pick stocks. He didn't watch the market every day. He just parked the money somewhere it could grow faster than a savings account. The other $1,200 stayed liquid in case life happened again. And life did happen. His laptop died. He pulled $500, replaced it, and kept moving. The freelance work kept coming, but not because he was hustling harder. It came because he'd done good work the first time and people referred him. He didn't have a website. He didn't have a portfolio. He just had a reputation for being reliable and fast. By year 2, he was averaging about $1,400 extra every quarter from side work. His day job still paid $63,000. But his total annual income was now around $68,600. A small bump. But the trajectory had changed. This is the part most people miss. They think income snowballs because you suddenly make a giant leap. You get promoted. You launch a product. You go viral. But that's not what happens first. What happens first is you build a secondary income stream so small and boring that nobody notices it. You protect it. You sustain it. You let it compound quietly. And then, after a long period of nothing dramatic, something clicks. Year 3, Harry's manager left the company. The department restructured. They posted the manager role internally. Harry applied. He didn't think he'd get it. He had no leadership experience. But he had something else. He had a reputation for solving problems without drama. He had a track record of finishing projects under budget. And in the interview, when they asked what he'd do differently, he didn't talk about innovation or transformation. He talked about systems. He talked about protecting what works and improving what doesn't. They offered him the job. His salary jumped to $79,000. Here's the twist. The promotion didn't feel like a windfall. It felt like confirmation. Because by the time it happened, Harry had already been living differently for 3 years. He'd already learned to delay gratification. He'd already learned to protect his habits through disruption. The extra income didn't change his identity. It amplified the pattern he'd already built. He kept freelancing. He kept funneling money into the brokerage account. He kept living in the same apartment. And his income kept growing. By year 4, his brokerage account had $18,000 in it. His freelance income had grown to around $8,000 a year because he'd raised his rates and become more selective about projects. His day job now paid $79,000. His total annual income was around $87,000. But here's what mattered more. His expenses hadn't grown. He still spent about $52,000 a year. The gap between earning and spending had widened from $400 a month to nearly $3,000. This is the flip. This is the handoff moment. Harry stopped thinking about income as something that arrived and disappeared. He started thinking about income as something that could be stored, redirected, and multiplied. He wasn't just earning more. He was keeping more. And the money he kept wasn't sitting idle. It was working. The index fund was growing. The freelance referrals were compounding. The reputation was spreading. Year 5, 2 things happened. First, a former client offered him a consulting retainer. $2,400 a month to be on call for database questions. It required maybe 6 hours of his time. He said yes. Second, his brokerage account crossed $31,000, and the annual returns alone were now adding around $2,000 a year without him lifting a finger. His total income, including salary, freelance, retainer, and investment growth, was now over $110,000. He hadn't gone viral. He hadn't invented anything. He'd just protected the pattern for 5 years. But here's what kept him safe. He didn't upgrade his life. He didn't move to a bigger apartment. He didn't buy a new car. He didn't start flexing on social media. He stayed invisible. Because the moment you look like you're winning, people start asking for favors, pitching you schemes, and expecting you to behave differently. Stealth wealth isn't about being secretive. It's about being strategic. It's about letting your systems compound without interference. Harry's life didn't look different from the outside, but his freedom had completely changed. He had 8 months of expenses saved. He had income streams that didn't depend on a single employer. He had investments that grew while he slept. And he had the psychological flexibility to say no to things that didn't serve him. That's what the snowball actually looks like. It's not a sudden explosion. It's a quiet accumulation of options. So here's what happens before income snowballs. First, you become aware of where money actually goes. You track it without judgment. You see the leaks. Second, you create separation. You move money into a space where it can't be casually spent. You protect the gap. Third, you endure. You keep the system alive through car repairs, laptop failures, and months where nothing feels like it's working. You don't quit the pattern. And fourth, you redirect. You take the margin you've protected and you aim it at something that grows. Freelance work. Skills. Investments. Reputation. The sequence is always the same. Awareness, separation, endurance, redirection. If you skip a step, the snowball never forms. If you protect the pattern, the snowball becomes inevitable. It just takes longer than you want and starts smaller than you expect. Tonight, open a spreadsheet. Write down every dollar you spent this week. Don't fix anything. Just see it. Then tomorrow, move $20 into a separate account. Call it the gap account. Do it again next week. And the week after. Protect the transfer even when life disrupts the balance. That's the setup. That's the pre-ignition phase. The spark comes later. But it only comes if you build the conditions first. This is educational content, not financial advice. But if you're tired of waiting for a breakthrough that never arrives, stop looking for the spark. Start building the sequence. The income snowball doesn't begin with a miracle. It begins with a pattern you protect until the math catches up.